All right, everybody, welcome aboard here to the Sports Talk Nation. Michael Cohen here with you. We are finally going to talk about the Giants' coaching situation, and of course, as we're talking about, the biggest story, perhaps of this entire offseason as we get going here, has, of course, broke on Tuesday, and it's developed even further on Wednesday here as we go into a Thursday, and that, of course, John Harbaugh getting released by the Baltimore Ravens, and just like that, he becomes the top coaching candidate around the entire NFL. 6 coaching vacancies in the NFL, and from everything that I have seen that has been reported, whether it be NFL Network, whether it be locally here in New York with guys like Gary Myers and Connor Hughes and SNY, it sounds like you have as many as 9 teams, and these are including teams that still have head coaches in place. As many as 9 teams have potentially reached out to Harbaugh and his party to see if he is interested in their job. It is an incredible situation because it isn't often you get a Hall of Fame caliber head coach on the market like this. And of course, Harbaugh, after 18 years in Baltimore, there are, of course, rumblings coming down the stretch of this year that Harbaugh and the Ravens may end up splitting apart. At the time, I didn't necessarily believe it. And even as recently as last Sunday, even when they lost to the Steelers in heartbreaking fashion, I thought, even with that, I just can't picture John Harbaugh leaving the Baltimore Ravens. But that's the case. He is no longer the head coach of the Ravens, but he becomes the most coveted free agent, if you will, as far as head coaches are concerned, on the market. And you can certainly understand why. You're talking about a guy who is a culture changer, a guy who knows how to win games. He is old school, certainly in that regard. 180 wins to his name, a Super Bowl championship back in 2012. And when he came to the Ravens, they were struggling at the time. They were kind of the down end of that group that, of course, won the big game back in the year 2000, and they had really struggled to stay consistently good at the end of the Brian Billick era. And then when John Harbaugh came in there, they got good very, very quickly, and they stayed really good and stayed a contender almost every single year in the playoffs, almost every single year, either a division champion or a wild card contender, and of course a team that would, take on the Steelers head on, take on the Patriots head on in the playoffs, beat both of those teams in the playoffs at times. Had that huge, epic playoff game against Denver on their Super Bowl run back in 2012. This is a guy who has been front and center of the Ravens for 18 years. He's been the face of that franchise for so long, and really not just the football team, but also the community down there in Baltimore. So when you bring a guy like this in, you're getting the entire package. And that's why if you're the Giants, if you are the New York Football Giants, you're going to have competition for a guy like this, you got to do everything you possibly can to go out there and get him. Everything that's been reported is the Giants have done a lot of background work and a lot of homework on Harbaugh. They are, I would assume, expected to interview him sometime next week. Harbaugh, apparently, from what I saw here, Gary Myers saying that Harbaugh's not going to take any interviews from teams this week. He's taking a week off to decompress, figure things out, figure out what he wants to do with his assistant coaches, and I guess at that point, make a move on which situation he feels is the best for him moving forward in his family. The Giants, to me, have to be in front and center. They make so much sense. They got a young quarterback, obviously in Jackson Dart, a quarterback who has potential to become a very good player in this league. You have the return of Malik Neighbors, of course, next season. Neighbors, one of the best receivers in the league back in 2024, had the horrible injury against the Chargers earlier this year. You're going to have him back at full strength. You're going to have Cam Skidwell back at full strength next year. You have talent on the defensive side of the ball, and you have potentially Harbaugh come in, a guy who is a CEO type, and that's what the Giants need. The Giants haven't had that kind of coach since Tom Coughlin. I mean, it's been that long. And when you look what the Giants have gone through in trying to replace Coughlin since they moved on from him back at the end of, the 2016 season, they kept putting square pegs into a round hole, whether it be Ben McAdoo, whether it be Pat Shurmur, whether it be, of course, Joe Judge, and then more recently with Brian Daboll. It just never really worked out. And I know Brian Daboll won a Coach of the Year award in 2022. They won a playoff game that year. It really was downhill after that. And I remember that team got off to a hot start that year in 2022, and I think they went 3-6-1 down the stretch of that season. So it's really been downhill with Dable all the way until he got fired this past November. So for the Giants to go out there, you can't fool around with this one. They have been dead serious in trying to find the right guy. They have obviously interest in Harbaugh. They've already interviewed Kevin Stefanski, formerly of the Cleveland Browns, who also was relieved of his duties this week, and they're also interviewing Mike McCarthy. So they are going after some big name coaches, head coaches, to try to see who wants to come here and lead what is a young team. Now, everything that I see on here on social media, everyone's saying that if, let's just say, Harbaugh wants the Giants job and he wants his own GM, the thought is that the Giants are not going to stand in the way. They would move on from Joe Schoen. But there's also reports that maybe Harbaugh may not have an issue with the Joe Schoen on him staying here in 2026. So, to me, again, if you're the Giants, you do whatever you have to do to get him. You do whatever you have to do to get him. 180 wins, a culture builder, a game changer, if you will. If the Giants bring in John Harbaugh, automatically, in my mind, they become the favorites in the NFC East next year. Take a look at that division right now, just from the head coaching standpoint. You got Brian Schottenheimer in Dallas going into his second year. You got Dan Quinn, who is coming off a bad year in Washington. He's had to change his coaching staff. Cliff Kingsbury, no longer the OC down there in Washington now. You got Nick Sirianni, who, even though I think he's done a good job in Philadelphia, and he, of course, has won a Super Bowl championship last year, there's always rumors, there's always concerns about whether he's on the hot seat down there in Philly. Well, it's Philly. What else do you expect? So you bring in John Harbaugh into New York to lead the Giants and a young football team that has potential to be really good. I mean, it's no question in my mind what you have to do. Now, of course, there's going to be competition here. Here I see stuff here, throughout the day that the Falcons could be a team that could be certainly of interest for Harbaugh, certainly which makes sense. They have a young quarterback, obviously, in Penix, and they have a good young football team as well. Bijan Robinson, one of the best running backs in the league down there in Atlanta. You have another team, potentially the Dolphins. Now, I saw here on the DolphinsInsider.com, the Dolphins may have interest in Harbaugh, but no contract between the two parties yet. The Miami Dolphins currently do not have a head coaching vacancy, obviously, because Mike McDaniel's still the head coach. But reports suggest that the Dolphins' ownership has a real affinity for Harbaugh. Now, the Dolphins could be in play. Now, the thing with the Dolphins, to me, is this. I think what would be a challenge for me if you are John Harbaugh and you're looking at the Dolphins situation is, you got the Patriots in the division. They're, of course, really good. You got the Bills in that division, very good. The Jets are a total disaster. So if you are taking the Dolphins job, do you have a quarterback right now? I don't know if you do. Tua Tagovailoa certainly on the outs down there. I'm not really big on Ewers, who was the rookie who played towards the end of the season. They have an issue there. I think they're still kind of trying to figure out who they are. But again, if you bring in Harbaugh, and if he brings in Todd Monken as his offensive coordinator, you would have to imagine that would be the guy he would want to bring in. Apparently, that's one reason why he ended up leaving Baltimore, is because of a disagreement over what to do with Todd Monken and whether, it was Monken or Lamar Jackson being an issue towards the end of the season. Maybe that would start to change things down there in Miami. It would be interesting. But think about that division for a second, the AFC East. You would have, potentially, if Harbaugh went to the Dolphins, you would have Vrabel in New England. You would have Harbaugh in Miami. You would have Sean McDermott in Buffalo. And, you would have Aaron Glenn with the Jets. You might as well, if you're the Jets, you might as well just say, it's over! It's over. If that happened, it's over. But I would think between the Giants and the Dolphins, the Giant job might be more appealing. I think another team to consider in there is going to be the Cleveland Browns. Harbaugh is from Ohio. He is from that area. He grew up near Cleveland. And while I don't think he's petty from the standpoint that he would go to Cleveland to stick it to the Ravens because they're both in the same division, I do think Cleveland would be interesting, but their whole situation is always a mess. They obviously truly don't know who their quarterback is right now. There's always talks about Jimmy Haslam being kind of a interfering owner, kind of like a Woody Johnson, if you will. And I don't know if that's a perfect situation, but I think the Browns, just from the standpoint of closest to home for Harbaugh, might be of interest. So I think those are the teams to watch out for Harbaugh. The Raiders, I know it's Vegas. They're going to have the number one pick. They're going to probably get Fernando Mendoza this year. Does that make that more attractive for them? Maybe. Maybe that makes them more attractive. We shall see. But again, if you're the Giants and you meet with John Harbaugh next week, the message is very simple. Come coach the New York Giants. We have the resources. We have the capability to do whatever you need us to do to make a competitive football team, not just competitive, but a championship football team on the field in 2026 and beyond. Keep in mind, he is 63 years old. I still think he's got certainly a good 10 years left in his coaching career. But when you get to a coach at this point in the career, you're thinking 3, 4, 5-year plan at this point with someone like this. You got to sell him saying, hey, look, we feel that we have the talent, the resources, the wherewithal. New York City, we can sell this team that we can put a team together that could compete with the likes of the Rams, with the likes of the Bears and the Packers in the NFC and the Seahawks as well, and challenge them for a conference title and get to the Super Bowl. That's what you have to do. That's the selling point here for the Giants for John Harbaugh. Now, if they don't get him, the fullback options, obviously, McCarthy would be my next choice, just based on experience. But, McCarthy took the year off, so I think that does hurt him a little bit. Stefanski is interesting, but, 8-26 the last 2 years. It's always when Stefanski was the head coach in Cleveland. Yes, 2-time coach of the year. Yes, he got to the playoffs twice, and yes, won a playoff game for Cleveland. Keep that in mind. Okay, so he did do a good job down there overall. It was always kind of musical chairs at quarterback position. Deshaun Watson, that thing did not work out, obviously. They had Joe Flacco at one point towards the end of the 23 season, and that's the reason why they made the playoffs that year. In the last 2 years since, it's been musical chairs of different guys. I mean, it's just been, this year, of course, it was Flacco and Doug Gabriel and Shedeur Sanders. They just couldn't settle that situation at all with Kevin Stefanski. Obviously, it'd be more of a stable situation here with the Giants. He would be interesting. He's certainly more in the modern understanding of offense in the NFL right now. So I think that's why there's an attraction to him. But he is certainly far down the pecking order, at least in my mind, compared to a John Harbaugh. Harbaugh has to be top choice right now for the New York Giants. Also, one more thing here on this Harbaugh situation. Now, I saw this get floated out there a lot too. And I know I said in my last video I wasn't going to talk too much more about the Jets, and I really want to stay away from them. Apparently, Connor Hughes and Zach Rosenblatt, on their podcast on SNY, both confirmed that the Jets had zero interest in Harbaugh from his understanding. This according to Hughes. After talking to people, and then Zach Rosenblatt confirmed that the Jets were not one of those teams that had reached out to Harbaugh yesterday in the camp. As I said, there were 9 teams total. 3 of them had coaches in place, and according to both Hughes and Zach Rosenblatt, the Jets were not one of them. That is a damn shame. And that's nothing against Aaron Glenn, but when you take a look at his body of work as a head coach, it was not good. And if you're Woody Johnson, you owe it to your fans, you owe it to your entire fan base and your players to turn over every stone you can to improve your football team, no matter what. And for the Jets to say, we're not interested, we're not going to be a part of it, or maybe they did call, and Harbaugh just said, hung up the phone. We don't know what the truth is in that situation. Whatever it may be, you have to try to turn over every stone possible. If the Jets didn't do that, or they show reluctance to do that, that's a shame on them. Folks, leave your thoughts below. We'll talk to you next time.